Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming. We have a short agenda today, maybe long, we'll see. The first item is fiscal 15 budget. Do we have anything to discuss on fiscal 15 budget? Something that can't wait till Tuesday or Monday?
Monday, yeah, I don't think so.
We're meeting so frequently these days. So then, if not, why don't we move on to item number 2, which is retention of legal counsel for collective bargaining and general purposes. And we have the honor of hosting Mr. Joe Emerson. Mr. Emerson came very highly recommended. One is from Mr. Kelly, and we also got an independent recommendation from our mediator. And I also called MASC. I said, you know, we are looking for lawyers who we can do it. And then they said there was this web page, a whole bunch of lawyers. And then I looked. The closest one was also Mr. Emerson. So close means less time we spend on attorney travel. And I also contacted. He has been serving the Southeastern. So I put in a call to Southeastern School Committee Chair, Southeastern Superintendent. They haven't returned my call yet, but I talked to our former representative, Roberta Harbach, and she was also very complimentary of Mr. Emerson. So he's here to answer your questions. So I turn it over to
Well, I think what and having, I'm sorry,
That's all right.
having been on the committee that searched for the prior council, I would like to suggest a few things. One is just to have you start and give an introduction and a little bit about
Certainly.
yourself. But also I think at this point to say that just a little taken aback by the process. I understand the haste at which we're trying to do this, but it's not. I'm not comfortable with the idea that we're interviewing one person and nothing personal. But
I'm not surprised. I'm surprised by that as well,
yeah.
to be honest with you.
It's I feel it's an obligation that we have to the taxpayers, to the children, but even more so than that, the ability to sit down and kind of put together a set of questions that one would normally ask to the different people. So I do have questions that kind of tried to pull from various places.
That's good.
But again, I'm not terribly comfortable with how this process was put together.
I think that's a very good point. As you mentioned, we are in a haste because our former school committee attorney has, their firm has resigned, and we also have a couple of urgent things pending, as you know. And we are also in the process of looking at other law firms, and in fact, Dr. Rizzi had an interview with another firm. And Mr. Emerson also knows that we are looking, but he's willing to work as like a stopgap measure, and then if we are happy, continue. That's the understanding he comes here with. So this is not necessarily a permanent, but if he's great, then it could be permanent.
Well,
it's all up to the board.
And I take no offense if I'm not.
Okay. and I was concerned when I saw that you had, in your email had talked about the possibility of a vote, which to me meant some permanency tonight. So.
Well, we'll take a vote tonight, but as a stopgap measure, so we can always. Mr. Emerson also brought his, like some kind of a retention letter that he's looking, and you can see there is no. See, like if we go with the other firm that Dr. Rizzi and I were talking to, that's like at least 1 year commitment. So that one will take.
After the meeting on Tuesday,
Yes.
I asked should I bring their name forward for consideration this
Yes.
evening, and they proposed not to at this time.
Okay. Good.
Okay. So.
No, that's okay. My name is Joe Emerson. I've been practicing law since 1986. I graduated from Suffolk Law School in 1986. Prior to that, I went to Bowdoin College for my undergraduate degree. My entire time, in my 28 years practicing law, has been in representing school districts and towns in their labor relations, personnel matters, as well as with some school districts serving in the dual capacity also as their general counsel. In that, I've negotiated too many contracts to be able to count at this point in time, after that many years and that many negotiation cycles. I have had appearances before the Department of Labor Relations, when previously it was the Labor Relations Commission, numerous arbitrators, both through the AAA, American Arbitration Association, or some chosen independently. I've appeared in Superior Court, Supreme Judicial Court, Appellate Court on matters, so I've had experience in all those arenas as well.
Okay.
And if you had a particular question,
And we actually circulated your resume among the board.
that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. As Dr. Earl mentioned, had mentioned to me that you were looking at other firms as well. There did seem to be that sense of urgency. I had indicated to him, and share that with the committee, that if, and I have, as far as the retention letter, it's in a draft form, and the reason for that is because if there is an interest in just having it appointing as an interim, just as that stopgap, that's fine. If you wish, and I take no offense with a change down the road, I understand, believe me, I've read the newspapers, I understand what's happening in Stoughton as well. And it may be that I'm not a fit for Stoughton as it goes forward. It may be that even at this point in time, I'm not a fit. That's for you to make that determination and to go forward and allow a further search, if you will.
Sure.
But I'm here to provide my
Understood.
services as best that I can.
Any other questions, Joyce?
Well, I have a list of
No,
questions.
that was just,
okay,
that was
yeah.
just my introduction.
Yeah, that
Oh,
was an
I'm sorry,
introduction.
go ahead.
I would actually rather that you started with your questions, because I.
No, I asked them over the phone.
I understand that for the benefit of everybody here on the board, I think they need to hear your questions and the answers to those questions. That is why, if you're gonna expect us to vote, we need to,
Well, I forgot, what did I ask you?
I really don't.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm
Well,
sorry.
I believe you said you had 28 years of experience,
Yes.
and that experience, can you cover the field of what experiences you've had in? For instance, I think you're not strong in special ed, is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
We
I
have-
made that clear to Dr. Earl that that is an area of law which I had practiced in the past. The specialization that has gone on in that particular area is one in which I have, in order to keep up with that as well as the other work that I do, it was not possible to do it justice. So I chose to step out of that. I do have good working relationships with the firm that you used to have here
And
as far
just-
as the special education
Just so we don't
piece,
go
so
too
that's fine.
far
Right, right.
down a path with a
Sure.
misunderstanding. Murphy Hesse Toomey is still working in the SPED area.
Actually,
glad to hear
they withdrew, so.
I have a
mean,
question.
so-
Ron-
From the special ed area.
Well, if you read the withdrawal letter, it is, the firm has withdrawn, not
She's-
the,
We've
well,
had
that's
communication
something, that's
since.
something
No, I
else
think
that
it's
we need to
important that we
discuss.
need to know if we're discussing
They
that,
are-
is the hiring
Murphy
council
Hesse is
tonight.
still
Well,
working
we
with
are not,
us.
right now, we are not hiring special ed counsel anyway, so, that's something, that needs to be addressed separately. So, he has, our guest, Mr. Emerson, has no interest in, being the special ed, attorney, and, we are
That's
not,
correct.
he's not a candidate for that.
Okay,
No, I have,
And I have worked with Mary Ellen Swart, I don't know if she's the counsel here, and
Yeah, we don't- I
sort of in
don't
that
know.
dual capacity, if you will, that
She
if I had
was-
student
she was,
discipline piece.
She was for quite a while, but, and she oversees now Elysia St. Florian,
Oh, yes, I know.
who, so they work together on that work, and that predated the work that Jenny Tate was doing for the school committee, and she specifically did not mention that in her letter.
Okay.
So
I-
that, it
I-
doesn't matter, because we're
Yeah,
not,
that's
you're
not- that's
And I'm not looking for that work
Right.
at all anyway, if that would be
No,
something I'd recommend to go
It's a
on.
separate animal.
I'm
Exactly.
I'm
Very
glad you
separate.
brought that up, but this affidavit says that Murphy Hess,
Joe, we are not discussing that, so don't get there. I mean, it'll just be a waste of time. We'll discuss that separately,
okay,
all right?
do you have other questions?
no, I'm fine.
Okay. Katie? I'll start with my list, if I may.
Certainly.
As you mentioned, you've read the paper, you've heard about what's happening in Stoughton. What have you been told about the prior firm's departure?
Nothing. I
Okay.
don't know any, I have no information as to why
Okay.
or what the circumstances were.
Okay. Let me just put these in a sense of order because they're not necessarily in the order that I want to deal with them. As counsel for the school committee
Yes.
and schools, would you accept calls from any member of the school committee?
It would depend upon the procedure or the protocols that the school committee has in place for that.
Okay.
The usual procedure that I'm familiar with and most comfortable with is either receiving phone calls from the superintendent of schools or through any questions coming through the chair.
Okay. Have you ever worked in a system where access by the superintendent's been restricted?
No.
In your conversation, since you had it with Dr. Earle, have you been told who you would report to?
No.
How
We
do
did
you-
not have that discussion.
Okay. How do you regard the issue of privilege conversation between either various school committee members or school committee and staff if you were approached with differing questions, opposing?
As far as privilege, I consider the attorney-client privilege
Right.
to be very high. I would take a great deal.
Okay.
You could consider that
But if you were
very
approached by the
strongly.
chair and the superintendent with opposing positions,
I would try to get to the truth of the matter and find out what the actual facts are. I mean, that's the only way that I'd be able to function is to have all of the information to make a fully informed decision or formed opinion. If I'm not able to do that, then I'm not able to function as counsel, because without all the information, if somebody's withholding some or giving wrong information, I'm useless.
okay. Have you been in a position where there's been?
I have had situations where that has come up, and the way that I have had that addressed is usually would then sit down with the superintendent, and usually sometimes it's sort of in a neutral role,
Right.
and with the school committee members in a non-quorum setting,
Right.
and have that conversation.
Okay. Thank you. This will change, kind of a general theoretical, in light of what happened recently, yesterday in California, on tenure. Where do you see that having an impact on a larger scale?
In other states, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts,
Well,
not
Massachusetts,
imminently.
Do you see it affecting?
Put it
though-
this way, I think I'll be a lot older by the time something
Okay.
that changes in Massachusetts. Do I see it in other states across
Sure.
the country? Yes.
You see it
Excuse
affecting?
me, I'm sorry, Joyce.
Okay.
You seem to know what you're talking about. He
Oh,
certainly
I'm
seems to
sorry.
know what you're talking about. But I don't know what you're talking about.
Well,
So
and
please
you know
help
what,
me.
you'd probably be better let me
Yes.
start by trying to explain it, you can jump in and define it a
Certainly.
little bit better, but there was a court ruling, I believe yesterday, or recently.
Yesterday or the day before?
The day before, in California, that dealt with teacher tenure, and it's essentially throwing the concept out, if you will, as being harmful to children.
It was determined to be unconstitutional under
Okay.
California's
Yeah.
constitution, state constitution.
So
And
so
so
the-
part of the basis, the 9 students brought the suit forward against the state,
Yeah.
challenging that it was an unconstitutional because it had a bias towards, or it kept in place teachers who were not fully qualified, particularly in areas in which poor students, poor sections of the state.
Interesting.
But as we see teacher evaluation playing a larger and larger role in perhaps those decisions, tenure seemed to be a lesser role, and it was more of an
But
interest.
as far as the overall overhaul of
Right.
tenure,
Right.
I don't see that happening soon in Massachusetts.
Okay, as far as, and that's fair, but do you see it having, entering the conversation at all in terms of bargaining and
Oh.
teacher evaluation in particular?
Teacher evaluate,
Okay.
under that umbrella of teacher
Okay.
evaluation, I certainly do.
And that being the hot button right now, and as it is tied to bargaining, what are, I guess, what are your views isn't the right word, but what do you expect to see, or do you expect to see pushback at the bargaining table?
Oh, I expect to see
Yeah.
pushback.
Okay,
The tenure is or now professional teacher status,
yeah,
is a hot button with any union, and even just the concept of seniority.
Okay.
It would be even for unions that don't have a strict tenure statute.
yeah,
It's always a hot button.
gonna make your job fun for the next couple of years.
Yes.
I'm not sure again what you've been told about our bargaining situation, about the offer that has been ratified by the teachers and not by this body yet.
What I read was in the, if I did, and again,
Yeah.
I've been involved in these
Yeah.
processes, so what I see in the newspaper, I know there's always more story behind that.
Mhm.
I read the most, as far as that last status, all I know of this is what was stated in the Globe's Health section
Okay.
of the Boston Globe.
Okay.
either- I forget which, it
It
was
was
last
just
Sat, Thursday or last Sunday.
Sunday, I believe, yeah. Do you feel comfortable representing the school committee, given the information that is out there, and particularly about the unfair labor practices that have also?
To say comfortable, I'd be honest to say no. It's a difficult, it's a very, very difficult situation to be walking into, which may be why other firms, as Dr. Mazzi pointed out, sort of waiting to see what's going to happen. At least that's how I heard that response. And as far as comfort level, no. But we've all been in uncomfortable situations. I've had very uncomfortable situations in negotiations in many other places, and you have to get through those. At the end of the day, you have to have a settlement. There's no way that a school district can continue to function and operate without having a collective bargaining agreement settlement. So at some point in time, it will have to settle. When and how, I don't have a crystal ball, but I know that that's what has to happen. And I feel my role in that is to help to facilitate that, not to obstruct that, but to facilitate that.
Okay. That leads me to one of my later questions. Which talks more about litigation, but I guess it could apply to bargaining as well. Are there examples of that you could give without, again, violating any client privilege? Examples of litigation or bargaining where you've disagreed with your client's perspective?
As far,
Your client being the school committee?
yes.
And how do you work with the committee or the?
My job is to represent the interest of the school committee. And even if I may disagree and I may have arguments, and it may not be clear in my resume, but during the first 8 years of my work, I worked with my father till he passed away doing this
Okay.
work. And one of the things that he had indicated to me, and I found very true over the years, is that when you get to the point where you're having more arguments in your own caucuses,
Yeah.
it's because you were very close to settling and you're at that point.
Oh,
And it's very often it is that I may be saying in my role,
Mhm.
saying things that the school committee may not want to hear at that
Sure.
particular point in time, but it is to try to facilitate that moving forward. That being said, that's in the caucus. When you then get to the table, my job, regardless of what I may have said or others may have said in the caucus, is to represent the majority rule, the position of the school committee at the bargaining
Okay.
table, and to advocate for that, because that is the will of the committee.
Okay.
Well, it's also, since you're the professional, we would look to you to educate the committee too. I mean, if some members are insisting on something, maybe they don't know certain facts or the parts of the law, then, it's your job to educate all of us, saying that you're wrong because of this. But then if that person still wants to vote the way they want, then, that's the will of the board.
That's the will of the board, right?
And we are collectively a very young board in terms of the number of years. If you add us all up, it's not like some past committees that have had members that have been on forever. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I just want to throw something in.
Sure.
I would expect you to follow the will of the board, because
Yes.
that is your job.
That's correct. As I said, there may be animated discussions during the caucus, but what comes out of that caucus is the decision and the position of the board, and I am there to serve as an advocate for that position, the majority position.
Right, because we're hiring you to help us.
Exactly, exactly.
Thank
A couple more.
Sure.
What in your past didn't provide the outcome that you expected in terms of, again, just general litigation or bargaining? bargaining.
A particular case or a particular type of negotiation?
I think more type of negotiation or case, I guess it's up to you. Is there,
I've had a lot that have gone.
not as expected?
Not as I wished.
Yeah.
Or necessarily
Okay.
intended. But when you ask, that didn't go, had an unfortunate turnabout,
Yeah.
I've had cases in which, a recent one in which the town, representing a town, and there was a particular action that they took as far as a layoff process which actually eliminated the entire bargaining unit. We thought that we were going in the correct direction on that, and then we had an unfortunate turn of events before the Department of Labor Relations.
Okay.
And that was one where, because of circumstances then involved on the school district side regarding what they did with those particular positions, we
Sure.
came into a conflict with the two.
How was that?
And I went through, crossing guards.
Okay.
And so
Oh,
they
okay.
were in the police department,
Okay,
and the town decided that they no longer wished to have traffic supervisors.
okay,
The school still wanted crossing guards.
Yeah.
So when the union saw that after they'd been eliminated, that the school went forward with crossing guards, they took a charge and said, the school is a department of the town, and
Right,
therefore all you did is you took our bargaining unit work and took it out of the union
Union
and gave it to
busted, yeah. Wow,
So that was an unfortunate one, because
Yes.
the way that went forward.
interesting.
Very specific
Yeah.
situation on that.
It is, it's interesting. How would you approach differing, looking at our board, we don't always agree. We're
I have yet to be one that
opinionated
has
group, yeah.
unanimity on all points.
How do you approach when there's differing opinions within the school committee in terms of our interpretations of policy or legal matters? Are you,
I advocate for what my interpretation
Okay.
is, and if I'm unable to convince the majority of the committee, then so be it. But again, it is the will of the committee. I believe my role is to try to educate and share my opinion based upon my experience and my education, reading those policies, et cetera, and even contract interpretation. I've had plenty of situations in which my interpretation may not be the same as the school committee or the superintendent on particular matters.
okay,
I give my advice and my recommendations.
okay. And my last question.
Sure.
Looking at the list of schools that you represent, and I don't, again, don't want to get into where I'm putting you in a position to violate any sort of privilege, I'll just refer to it as one of the towns that you do bargain with. We know settled recently, and saw the results of that, and it was a grid that one would not perceive to be a sustainable or affordable grid, but the town's position is that they are able to override when they have those types of issues. We are not a town that overrides. Certainly, well, we've never had an override. I can't foresee there ever being an operational override. And we, if you've read the news reports, are at a place where the committee, at least the group that went into the bargaining initially, felt that the grid, the step grid was unsustainable.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm looking for your perspective, and knowing, like I said, that one of the towns that you work with had a grid that I felt was likewise unsustainable, but in talking to the superintendent of that school, it was, we'll just override. We're not in that position, so what is your perspective on bargaining a restructured grid? And how, I guess, realistic, we've as school, and I'll preface it with, as school committee members and working through MASC, talked to several school committee chairs and school committee members at the last conference who were successful in restructuring grid, so I know it's possible. I don't want to get into a place where I'm going to talk strategy on
Right.
what we have, so that's the other sensitivity, but I guess I'm just looking at a perspective, is no more the question, on the realities of this day and this climate,
Right.
and with where we know the MTA is.
Right, and then the MTA's position has been very difficult when it comes to any kind of restructuring. I'm in the midst of negotiations in which that is one of the issues that's on the table now. I've had, I would call it, limited success in other districts as far as how that restructuring has panned out. There have been some that have had changes to their structure. Very difficult to start to eliminate steps, very difficult to start to equate salary, the percentage between steps, that differential. Have those all been proposed? I've had a lot of experience now and a lot of different creative ideas, some of which some unions have been a little bit more open to and others not. So you have success and not in others. And as far as, if you also look at the list of clients, I have one community which takes great pride in, since 1981, 82, that it has never had an override. And has had very difficult financial situations in there as well.
Oh,
So I
good to
mean,
know.
there's some, if you look at the socioeconomic basis
Yeah.
of those communities, it's quite a span,
Okay.
in my opinion, on that.
Have you
list.
seen any incremental changes in grids?
Yes.
Fair enough. I don't know that I have anything more.
You did very well.
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent questions.
Well, and like I said, some of them came from, you know,
Previous-
revisiting our, because we were in the same position 3 years ago, quite honestly, our grid's been unstable for a while.
That's, to be honest, that is virtually every negotiations begin with that. And it's been very difficult to try to address that in some places, to be honest, because of the resistance that you have from the teachers' unions, because as they will tell you, and even as I've had mediators tell us, that schedule has been there 35, 40 years, and they're not about to start to change it now. However, there is the sustainability issue that we know is a reality, because as we go through this, and it becomes, are there ways in which to somehow bifurcate that, to do something that either at least slows the growth of that grid, if not completely eliminate it. The elimination is far more difficult than trying to at least slow the growth.
I would ask the chair that if, I mean, thank you very much for your answers, I think you're excellent. That, do you feel that at all, and it wouldn't happen today, I realize that, there would be a desire to have the ability to discuss his outlook on strategy as with regards to us in an executive session?
I put that in here, in the agenda, in case he has, because he's
I know,
doing us
yeah.
a great favor, squeezing us in on his way to another town.
Mhm.
So if he's willing, if we vote for him, I don't know, he may be able to stick around and talk to us. But because we haven't hired him, I didn't really ask him specific questions about those. It would be unfair to do that.
I would think so.
Let's see, do you have any questions, Katie? No? I had one question that reminded me when Ms. Husseini was asking the questions. If, hindsight 2020, if you were our Labor Council last year, when we decided to hold not paying the steps because it was a part of the negotiations, would you have advised us to go ahead and hold the payments of the steps?
Without all the information, I'm not sure that's a fair question, especially in a public session, because I think now you're getting into
That's going to get you a little bit of strategy.
strategy, yeah.
That's
There's also
okay.
pending litigation on the
Yeah.
subject.
Okay, good point.
Yeah.
I had some, he, just about 4 o'clock, he sent me his, and I forwarded it to Mary. Do you have, if anybody wants to see it, this is the retention letter.
Yeah. I understand, and I just want to put it onto the table. I understand that this is a very quick process, and as it was indicated, I'm kind of surprised that I'm the only council coming in at this point in time, because very often it's a whole list of people that come in. I do understand that there is that sense of urgency. There is a lot going on here. I'll be frank with you that may become problematic for everybody as time goes on. And there are larger firms, far more comprehensive firms. I make no bones about that. I come in with a very specific area in which I practice. I come in with, I feel, a good deal of confidence in what I'm able to bring to the table in those areas. If, however, because this is quick, if the committee is more comfortable with and because, as I said, that's a draft and easily,
Mhm.
nowadays with Word, it's very easy to do that on the computer. If you prefer that it be on an interim basis, while you do a search, I have no qualms about that. Or if you want to say, not take an action on the vote tonight, this is what I do, I lay out options.
Yeah.
Another option is to not act on this tonight. You do not have, in my opinion, you don't have to take a vote on this tonight. You could take this into consideration and see
But if
what else
we-
is out there.
If we, even if the way it is, we can terminate the agreement anytime we want, right?
Yes,
So the word
So it's
interim doesn't.
as
really-
opposed to any kind of contract or any
Right,
kind of
It's
things
it's
that.
really a simple thing. I had a couple of questions, so we wanted to also add I would, section 37E and 37F. So
Oh.
we're looking for both labor
Yes.
and general. What do you do for like a phone call that's a fraction of the hour? Do you charge for the full hour?
No, I don't. I'm sorry, I was distracted. I
Yeah.
thought there was a question. No, I break it down. Usually I charge on the 0.3 or 0.5 of the hour to the hour.
Okay, so like go by quarter hours? Okay. And then the payment due within 30 days of receipt.
Yeah. What
Is
I
that something
bill
we
the
normal-
first of the month. I send my bills on the first of each
Is
month.
that something we do with all our vendors, or do we look for 45 days or 60 days?
I don't know, and we
Do you know,
pay all the bills on a
Mike?
2-week cycle as long as
Yeah.
the warrants get signed, so.
The Board of Selectmen signs the bill warrant every 2 weeks. I don't know how often Maria.
Many-
That doesn't
Submit
mean
it.
that we wouldn't possibly
Yeah.
not make 30 days every
so
single
we
cycle.
can make it 45 days probably, is that?
That's
is that-
fine. I bill on the first of the month. I will tell you, I have that with every single one of my clients. Not all of them make it within 30 days.
So
Our
that's
bill
fine.
from our.
But I always
account
get paid.
is the first of the month for the previous month.
Exactly,
It's usually
exactly.
in 30
First of the
days.
month
So
for the
we
previous month.
normally do 30 days? Okay.
We do on our end. Again, I don't know what happens at your end. I
Well,
assume
we
the same
try,
thing
we
happens.
process bills every 2 weeks, and
Yeah,
the
so
accounts
you're doing
payable
the same
person's
thing we
always
are.
working.
We can do
It's just-
45 days if you feel more comfortable.
If you're more comfortable, I can change that.
Okay.
I don't hold anybody to the 30 days.
Okay.
I don't tack on interest at that point.
It's not unreasonable, it just,
Yeah.
as long as, it's a reasonable expectation, might as well set it there, we do the best we can. In a 2-week cycle all year long, unless there are unusual circumstances, the bills do get paid every 2 weeks, so if it didn't make it in that cycle, it would take it into the
That-
next
and
one.
that's perfectly acceptable.
And I'm sure that if Mr. Emerson has a problem, I think he would contact us and let us know. I don't think he's shy.
He won't sue us.
No.
Okay, so.
Can I ask,
yes,
I
please.
guess, I typically one would hope that the council and the superintendent would have a good working relationship, and I'm just asking if you've had the opportunity to talk to Mr. Emerson in
We have
advance
not.
of this meeting, okay?
And I agree, but I will
Yeah.
echo that sentiment.
Yeah.
That is, the relationship is usually, because I'll be honest, I see the superintendent far more than I see
Sure.
the full school committee
Sure,
in every district in which I work.
sure.
Now you're asking my opinion?
I guess I would ask your for opinion, yes.
This has been an unusual process, so I didn't know until I got the resume formally who the person was. There's been no communication around this. However, you do work with a lot of people that I do know, and we have some very pressing matters. And you come with a background that would certainly recommend you for doing the kind of work that we need done and that we need done now. So, usual, perhaps not ideal process notwithstanding, I would certainly recommend that we enter into a relationship, at least initially, to get some things taken care of that are timely and important. And I don't see why, I mean, since that seems amenable to you, that would certainly be my recommendation, to at least do that, because the work doesn't stop.
Right, right.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you, and I think with that, I would also like to suggest that if the vote that goes, or the motion that goes forward, that we make sure that you have that time to have that interview and at length
if
discussion.
that motion, if the vote goes forward, I would hope to make an appointment this evening for some time in the very, very, very near future.
Yes, I was going to
immediately look
say
at
the
some of
same.
the things that have dates on them.
Yes,
Excellent,
that
thank
was
you.
gonna be my suggestion is before we leave tonight. We have it on the calendar. At least one meeting.
Yes.
Now, I also have a question. I mean, everybody's having meetings here. I don't want to be,
Oh,
I would like to be in a part of that meeting if that would be acceptable. I don't know.
There are some matters related
Yeah.
to personnel that we need to talk about, and that might not be something that you actually would want to be involved
That's
in.
Joe, what we can do is, I'm sorry to interrupt you, because I haven't also sit down and talk with him. So I would also like to sit down with you and talk about the other urgent matters. So when I go see him, you
Fine,
can come with me.
sure, I don't want to step on anybody's toes.
Okay. No, I mean, it's not, what she's saying is not the toes, it's just the personnel matters, confidential.
right. There are confidential
Yeah,
matters that
that's
the
right.
superintendent and I would discuss that would not be for the school committee's consideration.
Right.
The collective bargaining matters clearly would be. And those are two different arenas.
Then could I make a motion to
Go ahead.
hire on
So
an
what would be
interim?
the appropriate motion?
I know, I don't
think
know,
Katie
but
said
I
it.
don't know.
Chair
I
should,
think Katie
Okay.
said it.
To
Oh,
retain this.
you wanna make a, are you making
to
a,
retain him as counsel, yeah.
Yes.
To retain
for
him.
As counsel or
labor,
interim counsel?
Say again?
doesn't matter.
Well, as per the retainer letter, it doesn't seem to matter a great deal as to whether the motion's.
So you wanna
So what is the motion?
motion to retain Mr. Joe Emerson for collective bargaining and general purposes. Is there a second?
Well, for labor personnel in general,
Yeah, collective bargaining.
As counsel for the school committee.
as counsel.
Counsel.
Council
Yeah,
for the school
yeah.
committee. And there's no doubt about it that we certainly need somebody, so I would definitely second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
This is the first unanimous vote we got.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you,
There you go.
Thank you very much. I hope that I'm able
You're
to
an
assist
impressive-
you.
Impressive guy.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, you said you have till 6:15, if you'd
I
like
do.
to sit down with the superintendent.
Well,
Um,
schedule a meeting, not to sit down and have that meeting, I don't suspect.
Actually, it's probably a 5-minute meeting would be good,
With the superintendent?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I am.
on an item that has to be replied to by,
Oh, on actual legal help.
yeah.
Well, and you
Oh,
have
that's good that we hired.
you have a 20-day
No,
response
there's another-
period to number 4.
Yeah, but there's
Or,
another,
you know, that-
there's another issue that has the June 17th date on it.
So it
How
would be
come-
wise to take a recess.
How come
and-
I don't know about those
Let's,
issues?
can I?
Do you know about
I
those
do
issues?
not know about this, and I'm not sure if I want to. Can we take a recess so they can discuss that before?
And allow
Mr.
me,
has to
with the
leave?
Yeah,
superintendent.
okay.
Yeah.
Chair declares recess.
Yeah.
Okay, we are back in session. Do we have any other matters?
And if we do, we have Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday to discuss them.
Okay.
You have executive
Um,
session.
Yeah, I think he's.
Do you wanna
he's
go
got a
into,
section called other matters.
No, I said you had an executive session.
Do you guys wanna, would you be interested in getting into executive session?
Yeah, I have a few minutes and
Okay. So,
Motion to go into executive session?
for the purpose of discussing
Oh.
strategy with respect to litigation on STA versus town of Stoughton. Is that your motion?
That's the motion.
and to do so in open
And
session.
to do so in open
would-
session, you read that part.
You have
Yeah.
to read that as the
Yeah.
chair.
Yeah, to do it in open session would be detrimental to
Could be detrimental to
the town,
Position.
position of the town. Thank you, see, we need you.
You should have my iPad.
I was gonna say that, I have it.
Yeah.
Roll call, Ms. Husseini,
Yes,
Ms. Enochian,
Yes.
Mr. Soares.
Yes.
And the chair votes that way.
we will not be coming back
Will we
into,
be coming back
Oh,
into?
I second.
You did second?
No,
Okay.
I just did it right now.
Okay, I had a motion, but I didn't have a second.
okay.
And you're
Reverse
not
that in the
to
minutes, though.
return to open session for the sole
So
purpose
we're
of
not-
adjourning.
That's correct.
All right, I'm gonna shut the camera off.
Thank
Shut
you.
the camera
Who's
off.
reading that?